Zucker is actually going to be swearing in the 3 new members. And we'll start with the mayor. Shall we?
Oh, okay. We need the microphone for the recording. Okay.
Please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name, do solemnly swear
I, Gerald Hoover, do solemnly swear
that I will faithfully execute the duties of the office of mayor of the city of Fredericksburg.
that I will faithfully execute the duties of mayor of the city of Fredericksburg of the state of Texas,
and will to the best of my ability
and will to the best of my ability
preserve,
protect,
and
defend
the
the Constitution of the United States
and of this state, so help me God.
and of this state, so help me God. Thank you. Thank you.
And at the same time, we're going to award Mayor Hoover with the certificate of election. So next to be sworn in is Emily Kirchner.
Raise your right hand. I state your name.
I, Emily Kirchner,
Do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear that I will faithfully execute
the duties of the office of council member
the duties of the office of council member
of the city of Fredericksburg, state of Texas,
of the city of Fredericksburg, state of Texas,
and will to the best of my ability
preserve, protect,
and
defend the Constitution
and laws of the United States
and laws of the United States
and of this state, so help me God.
and of this state, so help me God.
And we're also going to award Emily the certificate of election. And next we have Tony Klein.
Please raise your right hand. I state your name.
I, Tony Klein,
Solemnly swear
solemnly swear
that I will faithfully execute
that I will faithfully execute the duties of the office
of
council member, city of Fredericksburg,
state of Texas,
state of Texas,
and
will to the best of my ability
protect,
preserve and protect
and defend the Constitution
and defend the Constitution
and laws of the United States
and large of the United States and of this state, so help me God. Thank you.
also giving Tony Klein the election certificate. And at this time, we're going to do a ceremonial oath of the new police chief, Brian Borehow.
Please hold your right hand. I state your name.
I, Brian Four-Hour,
Do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will faithfully execute
that I will faithfully execute
the duties of the office
the duties of the office
of police chief of the city of Fredericksburg,
of Police Chief of the City of Fredericksburg,
state of Texas,
State of Texas,
and will to the best of my ability
and will to the best of my ability
preserve,
preserve,
protect,
protect,
and defend the Constitution
and defend the Constitution
and laws of the United States
and laws of the United States
and of this state,
and of this state.
so help me God.
So help me God.
All right, good evening to you. Thank you for coming early for the swearing in. I know I am very grateful for having good friends out there to share eyeballs during that, and I'm sure Tony and Emily do as well. Welcome to the second regular meeting for the month of May of the Fredericksburg City Council. I'll call this meeting to order, and I'll call on Chip Johnston, pastor of Hill Country Fellowship, to provide our invocation. Thank you. Would you stand, please?
Pray with me. Father, we come to you tonight grateful to live in a land where we are free to gather as we are, free to participate in a government, unlike so many parts of the world where there is no freedom to do that. And so we pray, Lord, over these leaders, especially the new ones that have been commissioned this evening. We ask you, Lord Jesus, to lead them, that they would lead us with wisdom. Pray that in all the decisions that are made, that full consideration would be made of the lives that are affected. And so we lift them up to you and pray your grace and your blessing on them. We especially lift up to you, Lord, tonight, our law enforcement and our new police chief and his family. And pray over them as we often do, Lord, for your safekeeping, your protection of them. We pray for our first responders as well as a part of this city, and continue to ask you to be ever so gracious and merciful and protect them as they work and serve to protect us. So many things tonight, Lord, we're grateful for salvation we have through your Son, grateful for blessings of so many sorts. And we lift up this meeting to you tonight. Pray that you would lead and guide in every way. And we pray these things now in Jesus' name. Amen.
Please remain standing. We'll pledge allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Be seated. And Chief Borehow, I didn't mean to leave you out of the congratulations, and thank you, Judge Becker. I appreciate your showing up tonight to do that. Congratulations, Chief. Look forward to many, many long years of faithful service. Thank you. Item number 5 on the agenda is employee recognitions and public recognitions.
Mayor, Council, we will start employee recognitions with Anna Hudson, our Historic Preservation Officer, recognizing Mike
Pinnick. Anna?
Good evening, Mayor and Council and members of the public. I am very honored and pleased to present to you tonight Mike Pinnick, who has served the city of Fredericksburg faithfully for 37 years as a loyal and first member of the Historic Review Board. Many of you may know that the Historic Review Board was formally created in 1985. At that time, it was just an advisory role. They didn't really have much authority. They just gave a lot of really good suggestions to property owners. Over the time, the ordinance changed, and now their determinations are pending and binding. Mike, a native of Fredericksburg, studied architecture at UT, and then he came back to town and blessed us all with his experience and passion for history and architecture. He's a long-time business owner and historic property owner on Main Street. He's raised his children here, and I believe for a while they lived in the property on Main Street. Mike has been a pleasure for me to work with. As the first historic preservation officer, I definitely have relied on Mike's knowledge and of the history of architecture, of knowledge of Fredericksburg and understanding of architecture, and especially those fine details. And if you've attended a meeting with Mike, you know that he sits back and he listens, first of all, and he formulates a really thoughtful response, and he's always trying to find a solution for applicants. And as I spoke to Sharon Joseph today about what she would say about Mike, and she said it was really his combination of knowledge of architecture and history that will be greatly missed and be irreplaceable to us on serving on the Historic Review Board. And some of you may have seen some of Mike's sketches. He, I think, puts the art in architecture. He did a series of sketches of buildings for the 150th anniversary that were turned into a calendar and later some note cards. I'm going to keep my eye out, Mike. I need to get some of those for myself, for my own collection. But we wanted to present you with a plaque tonight. Mike served his last meeting in March, but we wanted to make sure you had a really big audience because you really deserve the attention and praise and recognition for 37 years of service to the citizens of Fredericksburg by helping to protect the historic district and historic landmarks. And we know that Fredericksburg is a wonderful place today and a very special place today, as wonderful and special as it was 37 years ago because of your dedication. So I have a plaque for you.
I don't think so. I think okay, as you can all imagine, it takes a small village of people to successfully put together a city council election. There's a lot of time and effort and work that goes into this. This community, throughout my time in Fredericksburg, I've seen there are no shortage of volunteers. But quite honestly, I don't know what that people realize exactly what they're getting into when they volunteer for this. It's a lot of work. I've watched our city secretary spend countless nights and weekends working at City Hall along with other city staff and a lot of these volunteers. So we wanted to recognize everybody involved. I hope I don't leave anyone out. I know that there were some people just on the edge of the election process that maybe you helped straighten the sign or guide someone to the poll, whatever the case may be. But the folks that I am going to recognize tonight are those that worked day in, day out through the election. And we would like to provide them with a certificate of appreciation and also a photo with Mayor Hoover at the end. So starting off, and I would like all of you to stand up here behind me so we can get a group photo. Carol Hammerson. Eric Hammerson. Virginia Quay. David Roberts. Sure. Let me also recognize Roylene Roberts. She may not want to come up and have her picture taken, so thank you, Roylene. Bill Schneider. Fan club of this. Mary Studer. Malin Williams. Is Malin here tonight? Okay. And I think one more that is present, Joseph Yonke. Joseph? We have Joseph with us tonight? Okay. And I have just a few others to recognize that we will provide certificates to at a later date. We have Gordon Browning, Jade Browning. Is it Jack Browning? Jack Browning? Jade Browning, Lori Hess, and George Studer. So if you could join me in giving those folks a hand for helping out with the election. So another thing that we really like to do is recognize employees of the city of Fredericksburg. And I tell the story all the time about in my former life, I would get half a dozen complaint calls probably on a weekly basis. And when I moved to Fredericksburg about 9 years ago, I was amazed at how many people take the time to send an email, make a phone call, send a handwritten letter for our employees, city employees, going that extra mile. I've literally received hundreds of these in the last 9 years that I've been here. And it's the small things. We talk about customer service and customer satisfaction. The folks that are part of the city organization hear me talk about this all the time. Customer service is doing your job. Customer satisfaction is doing a little bit more, and that end customer being compelled to point out to the city council, their bosses, what a great job they did. The lady that has a limb on the fence needs help rolling her trash can, whatever the case may be. Our employees do go the extra mile all the time. So I'm keeping a list of these. I'm keeping a folder, and at the end of the year, I'm going to make a copy of this for the entire council. And I can guarantee you the list will be long. We're going to recognize these individuals. We're going to present them with a city challenge coin, and we're also going to include a photo of them with our mayor in our employee newsletter. So this is something that I really appreciate. I've really appreciated my entire career, And I've asked all of the employees that we recognize to be here in person, so that they can stand up here and we can embarrass them in front of everybody. So I would like to start with our police department. And I will read a handwritten letter from a William D. Curran from Crete, Illinois, that was visiting Fredericksburg on May the 4th. William writes, Clinton, thank you for the professionalism that Lieutenant Terry Weed showed in pursuing a motor vehicle incident at the Fredericksburg Chevrolet lot for an out-of-town resident. Best wishes. Terry, do we have Terry with us? Terry, thank you for your excellent.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much. Thanks.
Okay. Next, we have an email that was sent in from Priscilla Williams, a Fredericksburg resident. She writes in to me and says, I want to thank you so much for your employees who 2 weeks ago trimmed my trees, fixed a water line, a huge limb fell and broke it, and removed a hideous old telephone pole from the side of my house. I don't have the last names, but Jeff Wanek in our electric department, Chuck, Charles Collier, also in our electric department. By the way, that's 33% of our entire electric department out helping a lady with an old pole. And then also Brandon Vollmer in our vegetation management department, and David Feller worked on my trees and water line. What gracious, kind, and efficient men they were. Please give them a commendation for me. They treated me and my property with great respect. Fabulous. Sincerely, Priscilla Williams. Guys. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Clinton, and all of these good employees. Thank you for that. So I'm going to be a little rusty at times, so I expect some direction from Councilman Watson and City Attorney Daniel Jones and our city manager. If I get too far afield, you'll correct me. I have no problem with that. We go to public number 6, public comments on the items on the agenda. Okay. So I have 3 speakers signed up to speak on agenda item number 1. Okay.
That's what it appears.
Sorry.
That's what it appears.
Okay. All right. Annette Bennett.
Yes, thank you, Annette Bennett. I live in Fredericksburg, Texas, and I would like to thank the new members of the City Council for your involvement and concerns over city issues, and thank you for your service. The oath that you just took said that you swore to uphold the Constitution, so I think it's fitting for me to invite you to a wonderful opportunity for you to learn more about the Constitution. There is a group called the Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association. They are having a meeting on June 16th in Meridian, Texas. The fee for that is $49. And we all know that in these unprecedented times, our principles and values are under attack like never before. If you are concerned about the border crisis, drug and human trafficking, about the state of our country, government overreach, excuse me, I just caught your eye. Government overreach and abuse of our constitutional rights to life, liberty, and property, then our best defense is the county sheriff. And CSPOA is a partnership between citizens and their county sheriff and local law enforcement. CSPOA trains sheriffs, law enforcement, and city council members to protect citizens' rights and freedoms while upholding their oath and preserving, protecting, and defending the Constitution. Frank Habacker has generously offered to sponsor the tuition for 5 city police officers, and I will also sponsor the tuition for 2 members of city council. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Bennett. Jeanette Hormuth.
Good evening, Jeanette Hormuth. I live in Fredericksburg. And I would also like to thank everyone who ran and congratulate you for winning. I think it's wonderful. And we all look forward to encouraging you, supporting you, and praying for you as you move forward. So I was going to speak a little bit of what Annette was saying, but yes, I'd like to invite you to the Constitutional Sheriff's Conference. It's one of the best in the country. They've been doing it all over the country. It's run by a Sheriff Mack. He actually went up against Obama back when Obama passed an unconstitutional, put out a mandate, an EO or whatever, to make the states uphold a law to, it was the Brady Bill, about firearms. And he took it all the way to the Supreme Court. It's a landmark decision. And what it is that basically the president, a governor, a mayor cannot make a mandate. It's unconstitutional. They cannot overreach the Constitution, meaning if any law is passed or any ordinance mandate that infringes on the people's inalienable rights, the ones in the Bill of Rights, it's null and void. And so anyway, with what happened the last couple of years, a lot of people are very concerned because that shouldn't have happened, not even in Fredericksburg, but who knew? So we're all learning the Constitution. There's this training, I think, will be eye-opening. And I would encourage you all to go. I think it would be a great benefit to the people and to yourselves as we move forward. The second thing I wanted to mention, I forgot to write on there, but agenda item 9A, just very quickly. I would ask that maybe you take a little more time on that before you take a vote and look at it again, because, and maybe I'm misreading it, but my understanding is the city has extra funds that they end up collecting, and now they want to put in another fund to hold it, to use for other things. It seems to me that if you have excess, then it needs to be budgeted better next time, because that money belongs to the people. And if there are capital improvements, you work on that in the budget, not put all this, keep taking our money and putting it aside and then saying, oh, now we'll use it on these projects. So I'd like you to take a better look at that. I'm not a financial expert, but you had $1.2 million extra beyond the, sorry, I have to go. Thank you so much. And again, congratulations.
Thank you, Jeanette. Tom Marshall.
My name is Tom Marshall. I am a Fredericksburg resident. Good evening, everyone, and congratulations to the winner of this recent election. What I'm going to talk about tonight is the Constitution, because I heard that in the oath that every one of you just swore tonight. 2 years ago, this governing body passed a declaration that took away or prohibited the right of this to happen. Took away or made it prohibited the right of 10 or more people to gather for any reason. I hope you have enough familiarity with our constitutions to know that that was not a legal declaration. There are plenty of examples of government overreach that are happening. That was just one that this body contributed to. I hope we do not see a repeat of that while these people are here in office. Thank you.
Thank you, John. I apologize for my timer going off in the middle of your talk there, Tom. Thank you. Is this part of it too, the comments about anything off agenda, or is that later?
That's at the end of it.
Okay, so we go to 7? All right, thank you, Bobby. Then we're going to go to item number 7. The following items may be acted upon in a single motion. No separate discussion or action or any of these items will be held unless pulled at the request of a member of City Council. Approval of City Council minutes for May the 2nd.
I would move that we approve the minutes.
Before that, there are just 2 misspellings we need to correct. Jeanette Hormuth's name has 2 N's in it, and Garrett Bond's last name has 2 N's in it.
All right, we want to get these names spelled right for posterity.
Yes.
Where's that?
And the
I
list.
see. So Jeanette's is misspelled?
It is written twice, under 8, the first word is just 1 N, and then under 5, it's 2 N's.
Oh, 2 N's. Is that what you're saying? Okay. And then where's Garrett's?
Garrett's is on 9B and in the list of city staff.
Got it. We added a D to your name instead of an N, Garrett. You didn't know that, did you? All right, any other corrections? All right, I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
I have a motion, second. Any discussion on this? We don't need any discussion, do we? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Oh, back to the minutes. All right. Next, we're holding a public hearing to receive comments for or against a CUP, conditional use permit, to construct 2 first-floor short-term rental units in the historic shopping overlay district, requested by John Zuck for the property located at 403 West Austin. Need a motion?
I will be recusing myself
Yeah.
because I voted on this in planning and zoning.
All right. Council Lady Kirchner is recusing herself because she's voted on this once before in P&Z.
I move we go out of regular session to public hearing.
Second.
Motion second to go out of regular session in a public hearing. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone here to speak on this issue?
Mayor Hoover, the applicant, Mr. Zuck is here. Don't know if you want to allow him to speak now, and then I'll
Mr.
follow
Zuck?
up
Yes.
with the staff report.
Yes, sir, please.
Okay, well, thank you guys for your time tonight. So my name is John Zuck. We own the property at 403 West Austin. We bought this property about 3 years ago and spent about a year restoring the property. What we think is back to its original character. Originally, it was built back in the 1880s, added on to back in, I think, the 1920s, and then added on to again in the 1980s. So we spent about a year where my wife Helen and I are pretty proud of the work and the investment that we made in restoring the property to its original character. We're also appreciative of the comments recently made at the Historical Commission meeting by members complimenting us on the work that we did on the property. As part of that restoration, there was, in the 1980s, there was a 4-car garage that was built kind of connecting to the rear of the property. We turned that into habitable space, so a second unit essentially on the property. We currently operate both of those units as short-term rentals. Today, what I'm here seeking approval to add 2 additional casitas to the property. Each of these casitas, essentially think of them as large hotel rooms. They're about 20 by 20 in square feet, a total of about 400 square feet each. They're basically room enough for a king-size bed, small kitchenette, and a bathroom, essentially. We think in the design actually that we're improving the property in some respects for our neighbors' benefit as well, in a couple of different ways. The first of which is concerning the off-street parking, which I know can be an issue. Currently, there are 4 off-street spaces right now. In the current design, you'll see that we're increasing that to 10. So in the rear of the property, we have room to put an additional 6 parking spaces back there. So we think that's a benefit. Secondly, we've agreed with the Planning and Zoning Commission to add these units without any hot tubs or fire pits, and we understand we don't have any fire or hot tubs on the property currently. We understand that that can be an issue. And we're also moving the existing outdoor space to that second garage converted unit from directly north to the far west side. So there's one residence on Milam Street that my understanding is a part-time residency for those folks. We're actually moving the outdoor space kind of around the corner on the other side of it to the west side. So we think that will be an enhancement for them as well. The property is currently zoned as neighborhood commercial. My understanding is that neighborhood commercial, we can have up to 5 units on the property. So with these 2 additional casitas, that'll make a total of 4 units. With the design that we have, there's really not any room to do anything else. We don't have any plans to do anything else following this. So that's kind of a summary of the project. I appreciate the council's consideration of that, and I'd obviously be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Thank you.
Mr. Zuck, you're adding the 2 casitas behind the fence that's there now. There's I drove by, it's beautiful buildings on the property currently, and there's a wooden, looks like a privacy fence behind what you're describing as a garage. Is that correct?
It's not necessarily a privacy fence, but essentially, yes, that fence that you see there, it's basically wire mesh with kind of tennis screening over it. That will come down, and these units will be approximately where that fence line is.
Okay. Yeah. And overall, how many occupants will you have then on the property?
So we have the current original house that's on the property is a 4-bedroom, so that sleeps 8. The converted garage is a 3-bedroom, so that sleeps 6. Then the addition of these 2 casitas will be an additional potentially 4 people. I guess one point to note is that I've talked with our management company. We don't plan for these casitas to be marketed and included in the rental of the full property. They will be listed as more essentially their own individual units. So I envision, husband and wife coming out here and renting one of these hotel room like casitas. They won't be marketed as part of the full property that could potentially sleep, what is that now? Is it 14, 18 people?
18 casitas.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, if you don't mind, I'd like to
Sure.
continue in public hearing, and then if we have some questions while we discuss this in deliberation and item 10. Anybody else here to speak on that issue? All right,
I'll move, we go out of public hearing into regular session.
Second.
motion and second to go out of public hearing back into regular session. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right. So, is it okay if I jump around? Is that still okay? I can go to 10A and consider the approval of this, and discuss it. All right. Sorry, Emily. So we'll go to item 10A, consider the approval of this, conditional use permit as described and as,
Good evening, Mayor and Council.
testified.
Yes, Garrett Bond, Interim Director of Development Services. So Mr. Zuck did an excellent job of giving you an overview of the project. This property is located in a C1 zone at the property at 403 West Austin. It does lie within the historic shopping district overlay. There are 2 proposed 1-bedroom units. He touched on the parking spaces. Again, 4 would be required. They're providing 10, including an ADA space. The one thing I did want to point out, so this application is being reviewed under the 2018 short-term rental ordinance. The reason it's a CUP before you tonight is because of the fact that it's first floor STR units within the historic shopping district. So that's the only reason it's before you tonight. The P&Z did approve it with some conditions I'll touch on. Mr. Zuck mentioned the Historic Review Board did approve the project. We did receive one letter of protest from a neighbor at 108 North Milam, which is located to the east. I included that letter in your packet. It's primarily a concern with density and just the number of potential occupants. So tonight, city staff is recommending approval with the conditions placed on the application by P&Z. Those were the landscape plan approval prior to commencement of construction. The second, payment of parkland dedication fees prior to issuance of a building permit. And as Mr. Zuck mentioned, the development may not include any installation or use of hot tubs or fire pits. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
What's going to keep you from having 14 people stay there as a group?
There really wouldn't, it'll be, the occupant amounts would be noted in the STR permits. Of course, code enforcement would look to enforce that, but it would be limited to whatever's in the permit.
Mr. Zuck? Yeah, would you mind answering, clarifying for me what you were talking about? These would not be marketed. What was that you were saying?
Yeah, so when we list these as rentals, these 2 new additional casitas, we won't be marketing the property as a property that can sleep the existing amount of people plus these 4. These 4, I'm sorry, 4 people in the 2 casitas. These 2 casitas will be listed as individual units. So if you go on, let's say VRBO, it won't show the entire property with the 2 original units that we have now, plus these two casitas. These 2 casitas will be listed as their own individual units.
So ostensibly, what you're suggesting is then that these casitas would not be rented with a large party. If you had a 1 group party that rented the other 14, that ostensibly these 2 might be separate and might not party with the other bunch and so forth.
Correct.
That's the thought.
Correct. Yeah. That's the idea.
Okay. Do you have any on-site, not necessarily on the property, but do you have any local representative?
Yeah, we have a property management company that we use that's based here in town, and so they handle the reservations and the complaints and check-in, cleaning, all that good stuff.
And these are people that live locally? And
Correct.
okay.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
They work locally, their office is locally. I'm not sure where they all live on, to be quite honest with
Okay.
you, but yeah.
But you do have local representation here?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Any other questions or discussion? All right. Well, if there's no further discussion or questions, you ready for a motion?
I will move to approve, per staff's recommendations of adding, the landscape plan as provided and approved prior to the commencement of construction, payment of parkland dedication fees prior to issuance of building permit, and the development of the STR units may not include installation or use of hot tubs or fire pits.
Second?
I'll second that motion.
All right, Tony, thank you. One discussion item, are you confidently assured of the parking situation, that they've addressed that sufficiently?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right, I have a motion and second to approve this item with the stipulations noted. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. For those of you who may not have seen the map or don't know where this is, one side is bordered by the commercial business district, historic business district, and then it's zoned C1. All right, that was C1, and it's been approved under the previous ordinance that was passed in 2018. All right, item number 10B, consider the approval of a performance agreement and associated financial security in the amount of $32,641 for the Post Oak Village subdivision. Mr. Bond?
Yes, sir. Eric, if you could pull up the map on page 39 of the packet. So Post Oak subdivision is a 6.32 acre development located on the east side of Post Oak Road, just north of West Live Oak. The proposed plat includes 40 R1A zoned lots. So one of the options allowed for in our subdivision ordinance, rather than completing the full construction of public improvements for development similar to this, is the developer has the option to request a performance agreement that's approved by the city council. And if approved, this would allow them to record the plat and begin selling lots. I did want to note that before any building permits would be issued, the adequate public improvements have to be in place to meet fire code and other requirements for access. So in this particular case, the developer would be required to provide financial surety in the amount of 110% of the cost of the remaining improvements. For this project, that amount is only $32,641. If you've been out there, most of the work has already been done. They just wrapped up the first course of paving, so the streets are already paved. What we're trying to do with the developer on this one is to defer the second course of paving. What's happening in a lot of subdivisions is the work is done, it's accepted by the city, and then the home builders come in and tear up the streets. And so once all the houses are built, we have a torn up street that the city's stuck with. So in this case, we're proposing to approve this performance agreement, accept a surety from the developer, and then they would then record the plat. We have a 2-year warranty period before the city takes over maintenance of the street. And so before that would happen, the developer would come in, complete the second course of paving. So the hope would be that we have a new street and a lot of new houses within the subdivision. So city staff is recommending approval of this performance agreement. If it is approved, we'll work with the city attorney's office to make sure the financial security is acceptable. before the plat is recorded. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have. I did want to note, the developer, Jacob Grant, is here along with his engineer, Mark Fournette, to answer any detailed questions you might have.
And Mayor, if I could ask Garrett a question. Can you explain to the council what two-course penetration seal coat paving is? Please.
Yes, sir. So the way a street is built is the contractor will go in and prep the subgrade. That's where you see the heavy equipment stripping the soil off. Then base is brought in. It's usually white crushed limestone base. That's put down, watered, and compacted. Then there's a shot of very thin asphalt. It's called aggregate prime. That's placed on the surface, and then that's followed up by the first course of pavement. And we use chip seal here in the city, which is basically asphalt and rock or gravel that forms, it cures to create that pavement surface. So typically there's two courses shot. In this instance, we'll go in, or they've already done the first course, and then the second course wouldn't occur until, I think, 18 months is what's being proposed. So again, the hope is that we have a brand new street when it's turned over to the city for city maintenance.
Thank you for that, Mr. Bailey. I'm assuming you assume we didn't know that.
Well,
We know all that.
I didn't assume that
We're
you
up
were
on
all,
anything. It's how you build a street, right?
all street engineers. So, and this is an advantage for the city, the developer, and the contractor that does the work. So again, working with the developer and the contractor to try to prevent those issues through the building process, we don't have a major issue, costly issue at the end of that 2-year warranty period.
I know you're doing your job, and I didn't know that, and I'm glad to learn it.
If y'all want to come see it in action, our street department's about to start paving.
Oh, that sounds like fun. Thank you. What time?
The heat of the day.
Have you worked with these people before?
Yes, they've done a number of developments around the city. Mr. Grant is actually the home builder as well, so it's a perfect case to try this on.
Okay.
I make a motion, we accept the request on 10B.
I'll second.
Have a motion and a second to approve this request as presented. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. All right, so we're going to go to the 10C to consider and discuss a presentation on our annual water supply report. Mr. Bailey?
Okay, Mayor, Council, this is an update on the city's water supply. We'll provide a little bit of information on the city's water distribution system as well. And we have our Hill Country Underground Water Conservation District Manager Paul Tiber with us, who will give us the great news about the current drought situation and what we can expect in terms of future weather. This is, again, a presentation that we do every year about this time. And typically we do this just right ahead of the very hot summer months, so the council might be able to use this information to move out of or into a different watering stage. So we're currently in stage 3 watering restrictions, which Chris will go into this just a little bit more. That allows outdoor watering once per week during the week. If we were to go to a more restrictive stage, it would be once per week, but half the allotted time for watering. So we go from 8 hours a day to 4 hours a day. If we lighten up on that, we allow watering on the weekend. So again, it's information that the council can help use to make a decision to move in and out of stages. And it's just good information for the council and the public as well that are wondering about the situation. So this is typically a presentation I give, but I'm handing it over to Chris Canese this year. So Chris Canese.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. Thank you, Clinton. Thank you, Paul, for joining us this evening. Always appreciate you and your partnership in this effort. Again, as Clinton mentioned, this is a joint presentation between city staff and the Underground Water Conservation District. Just a quick overview of our presentation, provide some historic local rainfall data to y'all. Not a lot of data to share, I'm sorry to say. Look at current water levels within our aquifer, look at the trends, look at what we're seeing in those aquifers over not only the last 30 days, over the last year, over the historic period that we have recorded data. Look at our water conservation plan, our goals, what we're seeing, how effective they are. Look at our water rate structure, water restrictions, and how those help in that conservation effort. And then look at the distribution system integrity. And then Paul will roll right into Texas Water Development Board and what they're showing projections out many years in the future, and look at that short-term and long-term weather forecasts and what we could expect, not only basically the rest of this year. So rolling right into the 2022 rainfall data. Unfortunately, it's not as plentiful as we'd like to see, but nevertheless, this is the data. This particular gauge is located out at Lady Bird, so I know some areas in Gillespie County have gotten a little bit more, some areas have gotten a little bit less, but this is the data that we show. It's about just under 3 inches, 2.8 inches. This is through April, so it doesn't include the last 2 weeks, which is about 1.5 inches below the average of what we saw last year at this time. So a little bit lower. We hope that will change soon. And then just looking since 2020 to current date and kind of seeing some of those years, the orange line there on the graph representing that average. That's a running average, so it does change every year. You can see since about 2011, that number has slowly come down, unfortunately, meaning that maybe West Texas is moving east. I'm not really sure, but that's not something that we want to see, and we hope that improves here in the future. But you can see 2022, again, that's just through April, but very, very low numbers. You can see 2011, which is an extremely dry year for this area, and kind of how we compare at this time. And then going straight into our aquifers. So the city has 2 primary well fields. This is the Canal well field. We have a monitoring well that's taken care of by the Texas Water Development Board and one of our test wells known as Canal well number 1. Canal well number 2, which is a producing well, is about 100 yards from this from this monitoring well. So we see real-time data as we're pumping that well, which is shown here in this graph. I'd like to note one thing to point out is the horizontal axis is the feet below land surface. So the water table here is fairly shallow. I say that, some aquifers are really deep. This is 65 to 80, depending on where we are and what time of year. But also know that these are 5-foot increments. So as we go to the next well field, you'll see that increment changes, which obviously distorts the graph a little bit. But this is the last 30 days and what we see. The last thing I'll point out on this slide is the little peaks are the weekends. So it's very important to realize that we don't allow outdoor watering on the weekends, Saturdays and Sundays. And you can see the response to that aquifer as we are not allowing that watering on the weekends. Then just jumping into the last 12 months and the data that we're seeing in that monitoring well. There is a little bit of missing data here from that well, but you can generally see during the winter time we do rebound, and then here in the spring, kind of that sharp downward trend of that aquifer and that water table. One thing to note, we're about 14 feet below where we were last year at this time. So we are seeing definitely a much more use and not as much recharge to that area because of the rainfall.
What causes missing data?
Might have to defer to Paul. Maybe it's maintenance on the equipment that they have. Maybe it's just bad communication. It takes them a while to get out there. Material shortages that we see nowadays and so forth. Yes, sir. Again, these are maintained not by the city, but by the Texas Water Development Board. And I'll also note that you can go online and get this data real time. Anybody, it's on the Texas Water Development Board webpage, which is how we get these graphs, how we monitor the aquifers as well. And then looking at the period of record for that same well field, I failed to mention the well field is about 5 miles out 290 east. So if you know where Gaming Lane is, it's just prior to that. It's kind of a long stretch that goes from 290 down to the river, Burnouts River. So looking at this trend line, you can see back to 2001, which is when this monitoring well, our monitoring equipment was installed in that well. See a slight tick up. I mean, some years are a little bit low, but basically the rebound every winter is generally an upward tick. And then we get to, say, 2008, 2009, that number starts coming down to about 2014. 2014 is an important date. That's when we changed our water conservation ordinance. So we changed a few things that I'll discuss here in a little bit. But you can see, generally speaking, some of that rebound up to about maybe 2018 timeframe. And then generally speaking, what we're seeing now is kind of a downward trend since about 2018 in that aquifer. And please feel free to answer any questions as I'm going here, if you do have some. Going on to the next monitoring well, which is located out Old San Antonio Road. So not that far to town, just head south on Old San Antonio Road. We have a number of different wells within that area, a little bit more spread out than the Canal well field. But this is the last 30 days. As I mentioned in the previous charts that we were looking at, there were 5-foot increments. These are 6-inch increments. So just know that even though it looks like there are some peaks, these are actually fairly flatlined in what we're seeing in this aquifer. But this is the last 30 days. I would also note that this particular monitoring well is a fairly long distance from one of our wells. So we don't see that response as we pump that particular well like we would in the Canal well field because of the distance from the actual production well. Going to the next slide, 12 months, you can see generally speaking, again, these increments are 1-foot increments on the vertical scale there. But you can see that recharge in the winter and then again here in the spring where it definitely starts coming down. From last year, we're just under a foot difference. So don't have quite the response that we have in the Canal well field. But I would also note that the Canal well field recharges much quicker when we do get some rainfall. So,
Chris,
yes, sir.
how much water does each well field provide to the city?
Yes, sir.
Percentage wise?
About 50%, about half. Canal, we're probably pumping a little bit more.
Okay.
Probably 55%, 45% out of Old San Antonio Road. But generally speaking, a good rule of thumb is about 50-50.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, sir. And again, here's the historic period of record. This one goes back to 1993, so we do have a little bit more data here. But again, very similar trend lines that you can see, very similar years and when those trend lines change. Generally speaking, 2014, again, we saw a fairly good response. And then it's kind of flatlined since that point, since about 2018. It's going down, I would say, definitely trending down some, but not like we're seeing in the Canal well field. Any questions about the charts thus far? We'll go into water conservation. Yes, ma'am.
Chris, this is great data. Are we able to see like all wells pulling from the aquifer? Like, is it like on a big level? Can we see that?
So certainly, Paul does have a slide here a little bit later in the presentation from the groundwater model that does show gutter depression and kind of the areas affected. And the slide will definitely show where the Canal well field is. You can definitely see the drawdown in that area. So yeah, there are groundwater models that Paul looks at that we can kind of demonstrate what the effects are to the pumping in those areas.
Thanks.
And the response to development as it comes into the county too. And I know Paul's got some additional monitoring wells that he's looking at very closely. So water conservation measures, what are the tools that we use in our toolbox to curb and to conserve water? Number one here is we completed a leak detection survey back in 2015. I'll talk a little bit about that and working with the council as part of the budget this year and looking at doing some additional leak detection in the near future. Smart meters, automatic meter reading capabilities. I'll go into that in a lot more detail. Water use, reuse and reclaim water. It's a huge component. Reusing that water for irrigation, not using potable water at golf courses for irrigation and so forth. the water rate adjustment and the increases, not increases necessarily to the lower water users, but increases to those that do want to irrigate their lawn and use a lot of water. And then the watering restrictions as mentioned earlier. So going right into the leak detection survey, this was a three-phased or 3-year approach that was completed in 2015. Saw a little bit of that response in the previous graphs as to how the aquifer did rebound. But essentially there was every mile or every pipe within the city distribution mains where equipment was hooked up to it to see if there was leaks. So it's done through waves, and they have listening devices where they're trying to hear that water moving through the pipes, and it has a different sound as it moves through the pipe if there's a certain leak. About 130 miles of pipe was surveyed, about 5,500 service connections, and about a little over 500 fire hydrants. Approximately 75 leaks were identified, and these leaks are not leaks that surface. We obviously take care of those as we see them. These were leaks that never surfaced. Small leaks, but continuous water going through those areas. We estimate a potential savings of about 100 million gallons, or about 40 days of water supply, which is about 10% of our annual water usage, and a revenue of about $200,000. So going straight into some of our water losses and what we see historically, these water losses have to be reported to the Texas Water Development Board annually. They're due to the Texas Water Development Board May 1st every single year. So you can see the trends, back in 2010, 11, 12, where we're about that 10%. The trend line down, again, leak detection survey, other ordinances that were put in place and so forth. And then we are kind of creeping back up a little bit higher than I'd honestly like to be. Now, I am very proud of these numbers. I know some cities that are 20, 25% water loss. So, and Texas Water Development Board looks at those a lot closer. They can't get funding unless they do certain things to basically curb this. We want every drop that we produce out of the ground, we want to be able to sell and be good stewards of that water. So there will be some loss through flushing and other mechanisms just through operation, but we definitely want to get back to that 3 and 4% for sure.
Chris, I
Yes,
just
sir.
wanted a clarification here. I was probably reading if you did fill in the gaps for me, but the current water conservation measures of the water system leak detection survey,
Yes,
and the phase is completed in February 2015. And the top part is the things that you found, that you did 130 miles, 5,500 service lines, 520 fire hydrants, and in that found 75 leaks.
Yeah, that's our total system essentially.
Okay. So the potential annual losses, does that mean that's what you fixed? That's what you precluded with that?
We estimated that this was the loss going through those 75 leaks.
Okay, so those leaks have been shut, so that's what we've not lost.
That's correct.
Okay,
yes.
thank you.
So putting the water losses that we see on the last slide kind of into perspective, we produce annually about 900 million gallons of water for our customers. Comparing some of our higher water losses back in 2010, 11, 12 in that area, compared to some of our losses that we've seen here recently, that difference is about 46 million gallons. So we say that we are now saving that amount of water versus our higher loss years. If you calculate that out and look at what an average person uses, let's estimate about 200 gallons per capita per day, and you equivalent that out, we're saving about 640 additional persons. So as we continue to grow, we're looking at utilizing and stretching that water even further. So we're looking at about 4.5 years of growth. So rather than going out and punching more holes in the ground and producing more water, if we save that water, we can actually benefit from it in years of growth. Now this assumes about a 1.2% annual growth. So obviously those numbers do fluctuate, but assuming that it's about 1.2, which is in our comprehensive plan, that's about the percentage that we're seeing. Now, if you look at just the next line item, if you look at when we were at our best as far as water loss goes in 2016, when it was about 1.5%, it's about 91 million gallons in savings. So again, the same calculation, about 200 gallons per capita per day. Now we're looking at over 1,200 additional persons, or 8 years of growth. So again, every drop of water that we can save and utilize in our system or not pull out of the ground just prolongs our growth ability with our current infrastructure. Any questions about that slide?
1.21.
That's what this calculation assumes. That's how we get the number of years of growth. So we're assuming 1.2% annual growth to get the 8. If our number increases, our percentage increases, then the number of years goes down. Obviously, the more growth we have, the less years we have based on that calculation.
Do we know what our current growth rate is? Actual current growth?
Sorry, I do not.
Okay.
It's about 1.2, 1.5, right in there. Well, it fluctuates, as Chris mentioned. It certainly goes up and down, but historically it has been, I'd say over the last probably, what would you say, Garrett, when we look at the comp plan, the last 20, 30 years, probably, in that 1 to 1.5% range.
Going on to our smart meters, this is a project that we've had smart meters for a number of years, back to the mid-2000s actually. In 2019, we finished and replaced all of those with Census Analytics. Very good technology, very good meters, but automatic meter reading. So it's collecting that data, sending it through a collector, and we essentially collect that data at City Hall. How we use this from a water conservation measures is we can run real-time data, run reports based on continuous consumption. So we would assume that at night, your house has a few zeros in it when you're sleeping, when there's no activity. That if we don't see those zeros in there, or if the models don't show that there's some zeros, there's a continuous consumption, which would indicate there's probably a leak somewhere. It could be a running toilet, could be in the sprinkler system. There's a lot of different areas, but we use this to notify customers, notify folks, so that they can fix those. So not just on our side, but we're also looking to help out customers so that their water bills don't skyrocket and they get those repaired. Additionally, the customer can actually sign up through a customer portal. It's a free service. It's all web-based. You can sign up for this service that essentially you download on your phone, online, and you can watch your water consumption as you use water throughout the month. It can also send you text messages, emails, alerting you that, hey, you have continuous consumption. You might need to take a look at something. You can budget for it. You can set certain volumes. I want to use 10,000 gallons this month. In week 1 of the month, you've already used 5,000 of those 10,000. It'll say, hey, you already used half of what you wanted to budget for. So there's a lot of capabilities, but the customer portal is a really good tool that customers are signing up for, and we'll put another plug out here sometime on that too. It also enables code enforcement to look at it, if somebody is watering on the wrong day of the week or the wrong times of that day. So using it as an educational campaign and so forth too. Any questions about the water meters? Rolling right into the reclaimed water, huge component of our system. We produce about 500 million gallons, which is about 50% of the amount of water that is produced, potable water that's produced. About 35 to 40% of that is reused annually, and 100% of that during the summer months. So not only the summer months this year, we already saw it in April. In April, the treatment plant discharged 0 gallons to the creek because it was all being used by the golf courses for irrigation. So depending on the rainfall, definitely it depends on how much water we're pumping to both Boot Ranch and Ladybird golf courses. But a great use of that water for irrigation. Additionally, we do have another user, and that is utilizing reclaimed water for construction uses, dust control, and various, getting base ready for street paving and so forth. So another good use that's in our 210 permit with TCQ. And then the Freedom subdivision, we actually have a contract with them to utilize that in some of their common areas too. So they've been a good partner in doing some off-site storage so that they can store that water during the fall and winter months, and then utilize it in the spring and summer when we don't have anything available to provide to them because it's all going to the golf courses. Jumping right into water conservation measures, in 2013 is when the new rates were put into effect. This was done by a rate consultant that the city hired, looking at more of a tiered rate structure, again, looking to make those folks that are utilizing a whole lot of water pay a little bit more. So as you use a larger volume of water monthly, that price per 1,000 gallons increases depending on that tiered rate structure. The other thing that was changed was commercial sewer rates are now based on monthly water production versus that wintering average. On the residential side, your sewer rate is based on a 3-month winter average, the months of December, January, February. They average those 3 months, and that is how your sewer charges is based for 12 months. The idea there is what's being used is not being irrigated, because those months you're hoping that you're not irrigating any. It's all being used, so it's a good measure of your actual sewer flow going into the collection system. Again, mentioned about the water rates being in effect in 2013. Jumping right into the water restrictions. So in 2014, changed the ordinance on the watering restrictions and did some really good things. Clinton did a ton of this work, so feel free to fill in, because I'm sure I'll miss a lot of background that you did as part of all this. But essentially looked at the 5 stages, 5 watering restriction stages, which we'll go over here in just a bit. Every stage looks at reducing the demand. So stage 1 being the most liberal, and stage 5 being where there's no outdoor watering allowed, really conserving, just providing that domestic supply of and no outdoor irrigation at all. One of the big things that was changed was the triggering conditions and how we changed from stage to stage, really putting a local index into those parameters and what we were looking at. So a local drought index measured by some local parameters, daily average water levels within those 2 wells that I just mentioned, which are both in the Ellenberger Aquifer. Looking at the average daily flow of the Pedernales River. How is the Pedernales River doing? Very, very local, goes through Gillespie County, starting in Harper all the way down to Stonewall. Looking at the rainfall 10 months prior. So I showed the graph earlier, the rainfall for 2022. But if you look back to September, October, November, December of 2021, those months were very dry as well. So not just looking at current rainfall data for the year, but looking back at rainfall data even into last year. And then looking at the Palmer Drought Index was another one of those parameters to really get that local drought index. One thing we want to make sure that we have the ability to pump and transfer that water into the city. So using that as a triggering mechanism, if we have a well down, if we have a pump station down, a transmission main down, all of those things will definitely influence and could trigger a condition jumping from one stage to the other. Then obviously if we saw a decrease in production in one of the well fields. As Clinton mentioned, we are in stage 3, water conservation, current watering stage. We've been in this stage since 2014. I think it's the new norm, just to be quite honest. It allows 1 day outdoor watering based on your last digit of your address. Another thing that was changed as part of the water conservation ordinance back in 2014 is the number of hours that you were allowed to water. The old ordinance allowed you to water for 16 hours, starting in the evening, going all the way to the next morning. A huge amount of time to water. The new ordinance approved by council in 2014 reduced that down to 8 hours. So a period of watering in the evening and then having a little break and then watering again in the morning, which has been a really good water conservation tool as well, which still allows those property owners, a good amount of time to water. These are the different stages, starting with stage 1 all the way to stage 5. You can see the differences there. Like I mentioned, we're in stage 3 currently. Stage 4 would essentially just decrease the watering times to the evening only and not allow it in the morning. So that's the difference there. Stage 2, allows a little bit of watering, or allows watering twice a week. One day during the week and then one day on the weekend. So those are the differences between kind of on the stage 2 and the stage 4, both sides of us. As mentioned earlier about the recharge or the rebound really to the Canal Well field, and I mentioned the weekends with our current stage, we don't allow that outdoor watering on the weekends. So again, you can see that here on the aquifer and the trends. This is a slide that I added. I apologize that it wasn't in there Friday when this presentation was sent out, but who uses our water? Where does the water go to? You can see the different percentages here, starting with Boot Ranch, just over 1% of our production. Residential is just a little over 60%. City, county, public facilities, a little over 5%. Hospitals, clinics, about 5%. Hotels, motels, about 4.5%, restaurants, about 3.5%, schools, about 1%, water dependent industries, churches, food processing, all about the same, about 1%. And then basically commercial businesses, about 14%. So kind of just a quick breakdown of where that water is being utilized and the different users that we do have within our city.
Chris, I don't know if we can tell, but under the residential, can you tell how much of that 61.5% is sprinklers?
Certainly. It's about 70% probably, between 65 and 70% this time of year.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Moving into our water system, our water distribution system integrity. So this is just a list of some of the larger projects that we've done since about 2014, starting with the rehab of some of our existing tanks, installation of new tanks, one behind the hospital, the Windcrest water storage tank. That was an interior and exterior coatings system. We saw some rust in there and needed to increase the integrity of that tank. Built 2 new 500,000 gallon tanks at South Heights and Gaiman Lane. These are both, these tanks essentially is what each well field pumps into, and then it's treated and it goes into our distribution system from there. So the South Heights water storage tank is what the Old San Antonio Road wells pump into. Gaiman Lane is what the Canal wells pump into. We installed an upper pressure plane pipeline from Cross Mountain over to the north side of Stone Ridge. This increased some of the pressures and allowed us to essentially develop another pressure plane for that north side of Stone Ridge, getting those pressures where they needed to be from emergency standpoint and so forth. We drilled the Canal Well number 2 that I mentioned earlier. That was a vital piece for that reliability that we needed within our pumping system. Bell Street water line just completed. Our in-house crews did that. Failed to mention Jeff Rich is also here, water department superintendent, this evening. So they did a great job on that project. That's an old line, basically a transmission main between South Heights and Windcrest. That line had a number of breaks on it and was a critical piece of our distribution system. Talked about the census water meters and how they've helped. One other thing I'd note is during the winter storm, February 2021, we utilized these water meters for continuous consumption on people's pipes that maybe they weren't at the house, second home, B&Bs. We literally deployed crews, not just Public Works, but we had Clinton and Kent were out, Development Services folks, Parks, Electric Department. We had, you name it, if they could get in a truck and deploy, we had them looking. We give them a list, and it was a really good team effort. But if nobody was home and the meter was spinning, we cut it off. We just turned it off, knowing that there was some issue within the house. Some of the houses were literally water pouring out of the doors. High school was a perfect example of this at their field house and so forth. A really good tool. It really helped us stop the bleeding within our system to get those tank levels back up. A project that we are finishing probably in the next 45 days, hopefully, is our new pump station out at the Canal Well Field and the transmission main down 290 East. We now have that easement, and we will have the contractor here at the end of this month, beginning of June, with the hopes of having that completed in 45 days. My hope is that it'll start raining once we get under construction. So, and last but not least, as part of that 2018 water bond project, we built 3 additional 1 million gallon tanks at various locations within our system, which is a huge addition to our storage capacity. Yes, sir.
Speaking of that, how much storage capacity do we have?
Oh, that's a good question. Jeff, do you know that off the top of your head? Six, that's all elevated, so that doesn't include South Heights or Gammon Lane.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir. Let's see, good question. And with that, I'll be happy to answer any other questions. If not, Paul, I don't know if you want to come sit here or. That's fine. Yes, sir.
So I have one quick question.
Yes, ma'am.
This graph that you gave us showing who uses our water.
Yes, ma'am.
On the residential, you break that down by days of the week, and is there any significant difference between days?
I don't have that data broken out into different days of the week,
Okay.
Unfortunately.
That's fine.
And Mayor, if I could just add a couple of things to Chris's presentation before we move on to Paul. Chris mentioned West Texas moving this direction. Well, I'm from West Texas, and water conservation is real out there. In my former life, the city of San Angelo was faced with less than 12 months water supply 3 different times, and it's not a good position to be in. Water's probably more valuable than gold out there. So when we talk about water planning, we're looking at a 100-year outlook. The leak detection survey, that's a $150,000 cost roughly. To generate that much additional water, developing a new well field would cost the city $10 million. So doing that, buttoning up the system and saving is proactive versus reactive, going out and developing more water. Chris talked a little bit about the recharge, and Paul will probably add to this, but when you look at the rainfall, it takes about, and Paul, correct me if I'm wrong, about 10 months for that water to reach our aquifer, and it recharges at a rate of about 4% of what falls on the surface. Getting back again to the reclaimed water, we would not have the capacity if we could not deliver reclaimed water to the golf courses. We wouldn't have the capacity to deliver potable water to those golf courses, period.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here. Congratulations to all. Thank you all. To all new members. I'm going to start out with some data that comes from the Region K water plan. This one was completed in 2021, and it's the 5th iteration of that whole process, which began in 1997. You have 3 charts here. The upper one pertains to the population that is projected between 2020 out through 2070 for the WUG, which stands for Water User Group. And you have the population for Fredericksburg, and then for County Other, for both the Colorado Basin and the Guadalupe Basin. For Fredericksburg, we're looking in 2020 of having a population of a little over 12,000, And this is projected to increase out to a little over 16,000 in the year 2070. Countywide, we have a population of a little less than 27,000 in 2020, and that's projected to increase to a little over 36,000 in 2070. And over those different plans that have been developed, these numbers have remained fairly constant. Now, the next one will be done in 2026, and it'll have the benefit of the 2020 census. So it should be a bit more accurate, but still, these numbers really haven't changed much in each of those plans. The middle chart shows the amount of demand that these various WUGs will have. You have Fredericksburg, County Other, manufacturing, mining, livestock, and irrigation. For Fredericksburg, the demand in 2020 was put at 3,351 acre feet, and an acre foot of water is 326,000 gallons. And you can visualize this by looking at a football field, which is about an acre, and putting a foot of water on top of it. The projected demand in 2070 for Fredericksburg is 4,322 acre feet. You can see the other WUGs there and what their demands are, which really don't change a great deal. The Fredericksburg and County Other are the ones that have the biggest increase in demand over the next 50 years. Now, we end up having a total demand in 2070 countywide of a little over 10,000 acre feet. So the question is, do we have that water? Well, that's the purpose of the plan, is to look at all of the different supplies out there and determine if there is a need or a shortage. And for Gillespie County, it's the only county in Region K that does not have a shortage shown out to the year 2070, which is great news. And the reason for that is that our aquifers, we have 4 different aquifers: the Edwards, the Hensel, the Ellenberger, and the Hickory. And if you sum up the amount that they have annually available, that comes to a little over 13,000 acre feet. So we have a surplus of all 4 together of a little over about 3,000 acre feet. So that's why we are not showing a need here in Gillespie County. But there is a big concern here, and that is the amount of water that is in the Ellenberger. You don't have those numbers. I've got them written out here. The Ellenberger, we have an availability of about 63 acre feet annually. Now, the city is totally dependent upon the Ellenberger, and I would say 90% of the irrigation in the county also comes from the Ellenberger. And if you do a little bit more number crunching, if you combine the city's demand and I'd say the 90% of the irrigation, which would come in at 2,000, a little over 2,000 acre feet a year, would be coming from the Ellenberger. In the year 2054, between Fredericksburg and the irrigation that has occurred from the Ellenberger, we used a little less than 5,500 acre feet. And if you do that each decade, by the time you get out to the year 2060, we're up to about 6,263 acre feet. So we're getting real close to that 6,300 acre feet that is available from the Ellenberger. So that's the bad news of the whole study.
Oh, what would change that?
Sorry?
More rain?
Certainly. More rain.
Yeah.
You have other aquifers, but they're not as prolific. The Hensel, you can find some pretty good wells in it out west that'll produce 200 to 300 gallons per minute, but not the amount that the Ellenberger does for the city. So there would be that. There's other, I think, rainwater catchment. I think that's something that is going to be utilized way more in the future than what we currently are. On the next slide, this map here shows the southeastern part of the county with Fredericksburg Fredericksburg shown off to the west. And what this map shows are the wells that we have added to our continuous monitoring program. The red dots represent wells that we've recently have a continuous monitor system in them. And the yellow dots are the ones that Chris mentioned earlier about the ones that the Water Development Board has. So the location up on the northeast corner there, that's in Vineyard Ridge. We have one in the subdivision to the west at Coolwater. Stonewall has 2 wells, and we have both those wells equipped. We have one in a winery there on Yinsky and 290 East. We have one at Wild Seed Farms, one over at the Rocky Hill School, which is adjacent to the brewery right there. We have one on the other side of the river next to a subdivision up off of Gaiman Lane, one in Kane City, the southwest location, that's Marburg or Orchard. And then we have one north of the river south of Fredericksburg. And we will be, these are 10, but we've got 10 more that we're gonna equip in other wells. Next slide. That shows a hydrograph of the one that is in one of the Stonewall wells. You can see the static level, and then you can certainly see where the pumping, when they turn that well on. So the beauty of having this sort of a monitoring, we're able to detect both static levels and pumping levels. And as you can see here, when the Stonewall well is pumping, it's about 63 feet or so, excuse me, below land surface, but then it tends to rebound pretty quickly thereafter, which is another thing we want to see is how well the aquifer will hold up to the stress that's going to be placed on it. The next slide, that's the one in Vineyard Ridge, and it shows the data through the month of May. And it has a static level of around 175 feet with the pumping level about 185. But once the pumps are turned off, the levels rebound pretty quickly. And then the next slide is the Rocky Hill School adjacent to the brewery. And it has a static level of around 75 feet with a pumping level near 90. Okay, next slide. Yeah, I'm going to move on to talk about drought. And this slide here shows the U.S. Drought Monitor for the whole state of Texas. And I've showed what it was in May 10th, 2011 versus what it was here recently in 2022. And as you can see, it was in far more dry conditions in 2011 than what it was here just recently in 2022, but still Gillespie County is in extreme to exceptional drought, whereas in 2011 it was an exceptional drought. Next slide. This is something that Fox came out with showing how much rain is needed in the next 3 months for us to be drought free. So we're a long ways from being there, 14 to 18 inches. Next slide. I did another comparison with 2011 and 2022 with the monthly rainfall for each year. The blue bar represents the 2011 rainfall, the red bar 2022. For January in 2011, we had about a little over 1.2 inch. We only had half of that for 2022. We did a little bit better in February than what we had in 2011. However, March 2011 was considerably wetter than March of this year. April, we did better, but May, I don't even think we had more than about 0.02 inches for the month of May. So we're well behind what they had in 2011. And then you can see the remaining months for 2011. The year for 2011 only had a little less than 11 inches, and right now we are as of April we had 2.49 inches, whereas in 2011 2.92. So we're starting out similar. We're not as bad, but we're not far from it. Next slide. Here's the local drought index that Chris referred to earlier. And as of April 30th, it only shows that we are in a moderate drought, negative 2.38. So you're wondering what's the disconnect between the U.S. Drought Monitor and our local drought index. And I'm not real familiar with what they use to come up with the U.S. Drought Monitor, but I think it's mainly rainfall and soil moisture, whereas here we bring in the water levels. And as I'll show in the next slide, I think that is why we're still in just moderate conditions based on this local drought index. I look back at 2011 at about the same time, and we were in severe drought then. We were in a -3 instead of -2. Next slide. Okay, here is the map of the area that we monitor on a monthly basis of about 30 wells, and it, I think, addresses your question earlier about how this pump and what it does to the area adjacent to it. The bright blue circle there to the left, that's the city well field, which shows that between May of 2021 and May 3rd of this year, it has actually an increase, a recovery of about 5 feet. However, you look at the other red area there to the east, that's the Canop well field, and you're seeing that is showing a pretty significant decline from the previous year. But wherever it's blue, that's areas that are seeing increase in water levels. The one up there to the northeast that shows a 10-foot decline, that well was pumping when I monitored it this year. So that explains its 10-foot decline. But all in all, I don't think that we're seeing a major drop in water levels in the Ellenberger right now. And that is why the local drought index is showing us to be in a moderate drought. All right, next slide. Okay, I'm going to jump to some of the data that's used to project what our future holds with rainfall. And what we're looking at here is a chart that maps out whether we're in a La Nina or an El Nino in the Pacific Ocean. If we're in a La Nina, that means the average temperatures in the Pacific are cooler than average. If we're in an El Nino, it's warmer. But as you can see from this chart, we're in negative numbers mainly, and that would mean we're cooler than average. And this is projected to continue out through this year and maybe even into next year. The reason you're concerned about whether we're in El Nino or La Nina is from the next slide. If we're in La Nina, the jet stream travels across the country to where it's wetter in the northeast and in the northwest, but drier along the southern boundary of the United States. So we're in a La Nina, and we're certainly in a dry pattern. They are getting rain out in the northwest, and they're getting some pretty severe weather right now in the northeast too. So this does seem to fit with what we're currently experiencing. Next slide. Here is when the Pacific is warm, when we're in an El Nino. Then you have that Pacific jet stream moving along the southern part of the United States, and that brings in our wetter conditions. Next slide. This is similar to what the previous one was. It shows El Nino and La Nina, where you see those clouds, those represent lows. Where you see the arrows, that's sinking air, and that represent highs. And they flip-flop. They're exact opposite when you're in an El Nino versus La Nina. Next slide. La Nina has a major influence on tornadoes and hailstorms. When we're in a La Nina, we tend to have more frequency of both tornadoes and hailstorms, which we recently have experienced there. Williamson County had the tornadoes a few weeks ago. Now, when you're in El Nino, less frequency. It also has an impact on whether or not we get hurricanes. We tend to get more hurricanes in a La Nina due to the wind shear that's present at that time. So they're thinking this could be an active hurricane season, which would help our rain situation. And then the next slide. This is just the prediction of what we look to have over May, June, and July of this year. And our precipitation outlook looks like we are going to have equal chances, but after this May, we're not certainly seeing, that's our generally our wettest year, and we're certainly not seeing that this year. And June is also considered a wet time, and hopefully we'll have our average June rainfall, because come July, we won't be seeing much, I doubt. And then we'll have temperatures above average. That concludes it. Any questions?
Any questions, Council?
I have one question on how is our capacity at the wells? Like, do we, infrastructure wise, are we set there? Do we need to get different things if the need arises where we need to drill deeper for water?
We experienced a little bit of that in one of our, in fact, in K2, we did extend the casing just a bit to have that assurance. But I think we're pretty set right now. The one thing I will mention, one of our kind of long-term projects that we'll be talking with council about during our CIP discussion is looking at that future water supply, where that might be, whether it's possibly purchasing some property or securing some sort of water rights from a property owner. Not necessarily maybe producing or going in and drilling a new well at this time, but just looking where's that future supply at 10, 15 years from now. So land isn't getting any cheaper. We're seeing that, it's a substantial increase. Saw in the daily clip from the newspaper, the appraisal district property increases. So, looking to the future, and that's definitely one of the projects that we'd love to discuss with council.
I might add the going deeper probably isn't an option out there. I think you're fracturing that the water's coming from in the Ellenberger is fairly shallow. You get deeper, it's just not present. You can go to a different area and find additional Ellenberger areas where you can get water, but right where you are, you probably capitalize it as much as you're going to be able to get there.
And the 3 other aquifers you mentioned, are they just small sections? They're not really over?
Well, the Edwards, it basically is out west up on the Edwards Plateau, and it's 10 to 15 gallons per minute well from there. The Hensel out west can give you a few hundred gallons per minute. The Hickory can give you a couple hundred. In fact, the city has some, but there's a radium situation with that precludes it being able to be used much unless you can blend it.
I was curious, Paul, if you have any concerns about the new construction going on in the county, the new subdivisions.
Mm-hmm.
What would your concerns be?
Well, the county has a subdivision ordinance that requires water availability to be done. If the acreage is large enough, they don't have to do it. So, but if it's in the size of the 3 to 4, 5 acre, the developers are required to do a water availability study, which we review the results and then we make comments and recommendations to the county commissioners court as to whether we feel that the water is there or not. So there's a lot going on right now.
Anything else? Paul, thank you. Good to see you again. Thank you, Chris.
Good seeing you all.
Well done.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, these chairs I know are not terribly comfortable. If you feel free to stand up and stretch if you'd like. I'm going to circle back before we get into public comment. I have Jerry and Walter and Isla. Is it Isla? Isla, okay. It's Lila? Isla, okay. No, so it's a silent S. If you will bear with me, I want to double back to the resolutions. 9A is to consider the approval of resolution establishing an account within the city's general fund for the purpose of collecting excess funds on a yearly basis for payment of capital improvement projects. I'd like to make a recommendation to the council and your will to make a motion that this be tabled with new members on the council. I'd like to catch up more on the details of this before we discuss it. And if it's okay with you, I'd accept a motion to table.
Make a motion, we table that item right now.
I'll second.
I have a motion, a second to table. Any further discussion? All in favor of that motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you. Now I'd like to hear from Laura on the resolution, item 9B, the resolution related to the annual review and approval of the city's investment policy. This is what I generally call a housekeeping item where we have to do this every year, rightly so. Is it an annual, Clinton?
Or you might be able to answer that
Or is
question.
this an annual review?
Yes,
We're
sir,
required
it
to do
is.
this
Annual
okay.
review.
All right. I'm assuming council has read it, and are you prepared to ask, did you want to make any general comments?
Just to let everyone know that the Public Funds Investment Act does require the city council to review and approve this policy on an annual basis. We have gone through, we've reviewed it, we've made some changes to it. Mostly those are staff changes to the financial department for the titles. The senior city accountant and city accountant titles have changed to finance manager. That was done during the recent salary survey. And also several of our local banks have changed names. So those changes are on there as well.
So everybody sees on page 36 that essentially substantive revisions are nomenclature changes. I didn't know till today that like in our brokers and dealers down near the bottom, King's Capital Advisors is Canella and Company with a name change. So it's not the addition of new, it's just a name change. Questions, council? I have a couple. Anybody? Okay, shall I go? All right. Laura, in section XIV, investment training, B, investment training sessions not less than once in a 2-year period. This is for finance directors and finance managers, which is you and 2 of your staff, correct?
Yes, that's
David
correct.
and Krista. Yeah. So you're required to do once in a 2-year period, receive not less than 10 hours of instruction relating to investment responsibilities. Have you been doing that?
Yes, sir, we have been. We each have a certificate showing that we are current on that investment training. And that is one thing that our auditors, when they come each year, they request a copy of those certificates just so they can verify that as part of the audit.
Great. So it says once in a 2-year period. Do you do it more often?
No, TML offers the training usually every 2 years.
Okay.
So we kind of rotate who goes when.
Okay. And then finally, in the conclusion, in conjunction with the annual financial audit, a compliance audit will be performed on management controls and adherence to the policy. So in the audit, annual audit report, does it, it carry the compliance approval as well on your,
Yes, they go through and they interview several of the staff members and our internal policies and make sure that we're in compliance to all of
Okay.
our policies.
so you're going by the book?
Yes, sir.
Very good, Laura. Thank you.
Thank you.
Council?
One question, and it's probably an obvious answer, but on page 26 of the packet, item X, and it lists the authorized investment rules. I'm just wondering to what extent our current investments meet this criteria.
Yes, all of our investments meet the criteria that we're supposed to do.
Do we have any preferences of criteria?
No, the main thing is we want to keep our investments safe. That's a priority.
Is there an intention to keep some liquidity?
Yes, we also make sure that there's liquidity as well.
Any other questions, council?
I do. I was curious on the conflicts of interest section, B on page 23. This is all for conflicts of interest, basically you and your team with any entity. Do we need to expand that to council and any kind of conflicts of interest that we could potentially have with an investment?
Typically, when we do investments, we go out and we get the best deal. We meet with all the departments to make sure, see what funds they have to invest and what their project timelines are to make sure that, it's available when they need it. And we discuss that with city manager as well.
Okay. Is there a way that we need to disclose anything as council and what we could stand to benefit from in any of these, if we went with, a certain bank or a certain investment firm?
If there was something you needed to disclose that could be a conflict, yes, you would need to disclose.
Or about something you personally?
Not personally. I don't know. I'm just curious.
Okay.
And then question on, objectives versus priorities. I was just curious how that shakes out because you have 3 objectives: the safety, liquidity, and yield. And then in a different section, there is the priorities, and those are listed again. I was just curious, could you elaborate on that a little bit more in attachment A under strategy? You see what I'm saying?
I don't understand your
So,
question.
okay, in attachment A, there's an investment strategy and there's A through F. And that incorporates the 3 objectives on the agenda packet 22. I was just curious, like which one you go for or which one you prioritize more.
Safety is always prioritized the highest priority.
Okay. And the only other thing I had was just the name change of Guadalupe Bank from Guadalupe National to Guadalupe Bank.
We'll make that change.
Thanks.
Did you have a recommendation about the investment strategy attachment list?
No, I was just curious.
Seeking information. Okay. Anything else? All right, we'll take a motion on that.
I move to approve resolution 2022-10R as presented.
A second.
Have a motion second to approve this resolution as presented. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you, Council. Laura, thank you. Thank you for your patience and
Thank
thank you
you.
for your good work on our behalf. That goes for all of you who spoke here tonight. All right, let's go to public comments. Jerry McCorkle.
Mayor, we had an extra item that was added in the addendum. It was item 10D. And you can can take that up whenever you'd like. That's what.
OTNE, that's the mayor pro tem.
I just want to make sure we don't forget about it.
That's okay. Thank you. And I do that after comment?
You can do whatever you want to.
Please don't let me forget. Thank you, Nate. Go ahead, Jerry.
I'm Jerry McCorkle, I live in the city, and I just want to personally welcome our new council members and our new mayor, who's back again. We're glad to have you back. And I came here tonight strictly for the comment about I want everybody here and what few people are left out here to vote on the 24th. I was just laid back by the small number of voters that voted in our last 3 elections here. It's pathetic because these are important things. We have a runoff election on the 24th. But on tonight, I'm a part of the Heritage Sentinels, and they said, do not forget that our Congress is still meeting. And the Biden administration has asked for $37 billion to be given to Ukraine with no accountability. Congress is working on it. They intend to vote on this on Wednesday. So call your Senator, Ted Cruz, and say, don't give, and it's now up to $40 billion to Ukraine with no accountability. They're not telling you where it's going, what it's going for, anything. And here we're having a problem buying gas and other things here, and we're giving away $40 billion to rebuild Ukraine. Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry. Everybody get out and vote. Walter?
Good evening, Mayor and City Council and staff. And kudos to the 175th Committee Council member that was chairman and whoever else was involved. I know I had a great time, but that's not why I'm here. I'm speaking to you tonight as a former president of the Fort Martin Scott Friends. Over the years, Fort Martin Scott Friends has been a volunteer nonprofit support organization for Fort Martin Scott. Our mission to preserve and promote the multicultural heritage and historic significance of the guardians of the Texas frontier as a vital component to the colonization and settling of Texas. Since 2015, the Friends have staged numerous educational events to busloads of school children. Substantial amounts of money were raised, resulting in great physical improvements. A capital program and master plan were developed, a nature trail was designed and partially built. Implementation of the master plan had begun. Then came COVID and a waning membership from over 100 members to only 20 renewals in 2021. However, we continued and planned events only to have to postpone them, and you know why, COVID. However, we continued the planned events only to have to postpone them again. And then the city of Fredericksburg hired the former Texas Rangers to operate and manage Fort Martin Scott for a 2-year trial period beginning October 2021. Although protested by the Friends, the city ordered the Friends to vacate their office and pavilion with the Friends, which the Friends had paid for. The council did charge the Rangers to report back to the council in 6 months to let council know how the two organizations would work together for the good of the fort. I, as president, led the Friends meeting with the Rangers and trying to find a way. But then in our annual meeting of 2021, the members and board voted to dissolve. As of December 31st, 2021, we are dissolved. Since then, I've been working to legally dissolve the Friends. We're now filing our financials to the IRS, and after having an attorney file our dissolvement papers with the Secretary of State. Fort Martin Scott Friends officially no longer exist. Disbursements of assets, we gave the city back $9,468 in hot funds. A trailer that we had bought with hot funds was transferred to the CVB. A total of $3,380 was paid for that, and that was approved by the city. Approximately $16,000 of general funds will be transferred to the Pioneer Museum. Physical assets were sold to individuals and businesses and donated to Gillespie County Fair Association, the former Texas Rangers, the CVB, and the Wine and Culinary Center, or Flavors, Inc. Thank you for allowing us to serve the citizens of this great state of Texas and the city of Fredericksburg.
Thank you, Walter. Isla, Ruth.
I actually have more to say than I can get out in 3 minutes, I'm sure. But I'll try to get y'all some written information, and I'm glad to see new people on the council. Ms. Bennett spoke about law enforcement and constitutionality, and there's a couple of things that I want people to realize, because I think there's a lot of misconception in the nation, here locally, certainly. The police have actually no constitutional obligation to protect us. That Supreme Court decision was made in 1989, and it has been buttressed several times since then. In that case, there was a man who was beating the crap out of his son and eventually left him in brain dead. His wife, the mother of the child, had tried to get the police to intervene and protective services to step in on the child's behalf, and they never did. So that went to the Supreme Court. Rehnquist did the decision, and the ruling was that you have no right to protection. The police always have discretion about who they protect and who they do not protect in this country without violating the Constitution, unless the Supreme Court reaches a different decision. So the other case that went all the way to the Supreme Court, the lead opinion was written by Scalia. And in that case, there was a woman who had a restraining order against, again, a husband who kidnapped the children. She called the police. She asked the police to get the children and arrest the man. The police did not want to do it. Eventually, the police did intervene, and the 3 children were found dead in the trunk of his car. And again, it was stated that the government has no obligation to protect citizens in these cases. So I think it's a great fallacy to suggest that the government has a duty to protect us through law enforcement. Actually, we have the social contract. We have to pay you, but if you violate our rights, we still have to pay again. So I think it's really important that people understand that there's a lot of misinformation out there. And I'm going to be speaking on other issues on policing, because there's a lot of things that people don't seem to understand. And this is not a Democrat or Republican issue. It's a spiritual issue. And people really need to understand that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rowe. All right. City Manager's Report. Sorry. We're going to go to 10E. Is it 10E? 10D. 10D, sorry. I did get this, I just failed to print it. This is either action item and updates. Consider, discuss, and take appropriate action regarding selection of Mayor Pro Tem. Do I have any recommendations on this one?
I recommend Bobby Watson.
I'll second that.
Bobby, would you accept the role?
I would, thank you.
It's an extra $10.
No, no extra pay.
Okay. All right. You want to make that a motion?
I'll make that a motion. We appoint Bobby Watson as Mayor Pro Tem.
Okay, and I have a second. Yeah. So I have a motion and a second to appoint Mr. Watson as our Mayor Pro Tem. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Congratulations, sir. Sorry?
Thank you.
Oh, so I thought somebody else said something. You're welcome. Okay. All right. City Manager's Report. Thank y'all for helping me through this meeting, by the way.
Hey, Mayor, Council, this update is for the council and also for the public listening in. A little bit different report tonight. I wanted to talk just a little bit about a work session, council work session that we have coming up at the end of the month. It could be at the end of the month, beginning of June sometime. This is a work session that we've been talking about at the staff level with new council coming on. And I've always thought that doing something like this just right off the bat was very important. We are proposing at this workshop to discuss the city charter, how that applies to the city manager position, city council, what that is, how often is it updated, how does changing the legislation change this document. I don't know if everyone is familiar with that on the council. Council rules of procedure, how the agenda is constructed, how we move through the agenda, the order of the agenda. The city's ethics ordinance, something that we are increasing staff awareness of. I think it's important for the council to understand how that applies to city employees, the city manager, elected officials. And then finally, we would like to have all department directors at the conclusion of the meeting give just a very short presentation providing background on the members of each department and their function within the organization. Again, to give the council a very good, broad idea of the structure of the city of Fredericksburg and the function of each department. Later on, we might do individual presentations to council over the year, discussing a little bit more in depth the function and composition of each department. So we haven't nailed down a date for that, but it'll be likely the very end of the month into the first couple of weeks of June, just depending on everyone's schedule. And I think that you've been contacted. We're trying to piece all that together right now. Another new item that'll be coming up is a presentation regarding everything development related within the city of Fredericksburg. I can't tell you how many coffees with the city manager we sit through where people ask, what is the status of the development on the corner of Washington and Main Street? What is the status of the Albert Hotel? What is the subdivision going in off of Friendship Lane? We want to throw a map of the city up on the screen and show everything development related, whether it's residential, commercial, whether it's being planned ongoing or has been recently completed. What does that consist of? What is the timeline? Show trends in single family residential home permits. So you have an idea when we say 1.2% growth rate. Well, that translates to about 100 people moving to Fredericksburg each year. And here are the homes that are being constructed and where they're moving. So a presentation by our building official on everything development related within the city. Again, just to give you and the public a very comprehensive view of what's going on. Similar to that, we do have a lot of capital improvement projects going on. Chris reported on some of those on the water wastewater side today. We are wrapping up about 20 million in water distribution system improvements. That includes the 290 East water line coming into town. You've seen some of that pipe out there. We also have other public works projects, other parks projects, large pieces of equipment, programs that we have going on coming up. The comprehensive plan is one of those. We would like to give the council fairly regular updates on the progress of a lot of these projects. Again, as you're driving by them, as people are asking you questions about them, we want you to be very familiar with those. And quite frankly, those are projects that we're very proud of. The last item I'd like to report on are our staff idea of developing a town hall meeting series. We have been doing coffee with the city manager for several years. Those offer a very good opportunity for members of the public to show up and listen to a little bit of what's going on. Not a real comprehensive view of that, but good information nonetheless. And then also ask questions to typically the city manager, public works director, police chief. At times we have a city council member there and others. What we've seen is we have a lot of the same people showing up to those meetings. what we would like to do is get out into the community on a neighborhood's turf with their neighbors and talk about their specific issues, and again, share a lot of this information with people that aren't able to show up to coffee and or don't want to show up at council meeting to discuss these things. So this is something that I did in my previous life. It does raise a lot of questions and create a little bit of work. But at the same time, it's a really good conduit for really hearing from the community. And again, standing next to your neighbor on your street, you know, how is the property on the corner affecting everyone in the neighborhood? What are some of the issues that are going on there? So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions about any of those items.
These town meetings, were you anticipating them to be general in nature or specific?
A little bit more general in nature, and the idea would be once per month. We've talked about trying to divide the city up into 12 roughly, equal areas. It may need to be a little bit more than that so that we keep them small enough. But I can think of a few neighborhoods that, well, there's in Stone Ridge, for instance, there's a gentleman that has what he calls porch council. And they're kind of the sounding board for the entire, you've probably sat on the front porch out there. Yeah. I've done it several times, and kind of the sounding board for the neighborhood, and you learn about a lot of things. You get asked a lot of questions that you wouldn't otherwise be asked. So we'll start dividing that up into manageable chunks and see if that's something that the council would like to for us to do and to participate in.
Oh, I wholeheartedly support it. I wouldn't put that out. Anything else?
That's it.
All right.
Thank you, sir.
Council comments. I want to say, who was it that bragged on, Walter Modenauer on the 175th? Yeah. It was well done, Tony.
Thank you.
And I know you had a lot of help, but it took an overall leader, an overall head. Any other comments, council?
Yes, first of all, I'd like to congratulate the new mayor and the two new council members. I look forward to working with you and doing some great work for this great city we live in. So I'm excited about it, and I look forward to working with you. Briefly, I'll make my monthly airport board, airport advisory board statement. Same story. Hangar capacity is at 100%. Got 30 on the wait list. Fuel sales, we dropped down for compared to. Hang on, let me find it. It's a big number. For the first 4 months of the year, comparing this year to last year, we dropped down from 26% ahead of last year to 23%. So, majority of that is Jet A, but a pretty large percentage of that is the Texas Forest Service has a station here, and out of the 43,000 gallons of Jet A we sold, they bought 21,000. So we're still ahead of last year, and last year was just a huge record year. So a lot of good things happening at the airport. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob.
Let me just disclose, I appreciate it, Bobby, and we appreciate what the former city council, but I have resigned officially from the hospital authority, which I've been a member for 10 years, which is a conflict of interest. And also I've resigned today from the Economic Development Commission, which I've served on for 30 years. So under the recommendation of our city attorney, but I just want to make that clear. Thank you.
Thank y'all. I'm excited to be here. No comments. Thanks.
Like Bobby, I want to congratulate Emily, Tony, and Mayor Hoover. You did outstanding campaigning and worked very hard, and I know you will continue that work ethic for the people of Fredericksburg and for improving and making our town very successful. I want to also congratulate the voters. We had more voters this time than we usually have. We'd have more, but we had a lot. And because there were divisive issues going into the election, that's probably why people came out to vote in the numbers that they did. But I think what it does is it expresses their desire, this is my interpretation, to have safe, healthy neighborhoods that they can feel comfortable and at peace in living in. And I hope that this council will continue to look at those interests, because those people are very interested in working with the council. So tonight is my last city council meeting. I'm going to be doing some different things I'm excited about. My only regret is that I won't be able to get to work with these people, who I think will be great for the city. I do want to say something about the city staff, and we've heard a lot of compliments about you tonight, which are truly warranted. This city is fortunate to have some very intelligent, talented, dedicated employees. You run the city. You are the heartbeat of the city. Not only at City Hall, but also in the police department, in the fire department, and emergency management. In all areas of the city, we're fortunate to have these talented people. And they are responsive to us, to citizens who need help or need information. You have been very helpful to me. I appreciate you, all of you, for helping me and all of us as we go through our efforts to try to help the city. So I'm going to miss you all, and I'm going to miss working with you. But I wish you all well and much success. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you for your service. Thank you for your kind words. I worked with Kathy in a previous council, and we just really bonded and had a great time. I know her work ethic, so forth. So, I wish we had time to have a major event of celebration of your service, but she's anxious to leave. I asked her when she planned to be in her next place, and did you say Wednesday?
Probably Wednesday.
So anyway, don't want to make light of it. I've really enjoyed knowing Kathy and working with her. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Items for future agenda.
Clinton and I've talked about this. I will not be at the June 6th meeting, and I don't know how that's in light of the new development, how that will affect the agenda, but I just wanted y'all to be aware that I won't be here June the 6th.
Thank you.
Okay, items for future agenda. Of course, we have consent agenda number 2, award of bid for the comprehensive plan. That's a process that we have not completed the final interviews. I believe those are scheduled for the 22nd of June, 23rd.
It's in that time frame. I don't know the
Somewhere in that
dates.
time frame.
Yep.
So that'll be an item we're probably bringing to you the first meeting in July, likely. So that item will move. Update on the records management ordinance and plan. This is another item that we're trying to schedule a presentation by an outside city secretary to city staff regarding records retention. Her availability has not, she has not been available because of the surgery and recovery that she's been going through. So that may be another item that moves just a little bit. Shelley, do you have any input on schedule?
I think June the 6th or June the 20th. I'm gonna talk to her again.
Okay, so let's plan on moving that to the 20th.
Okay.
Cross Mountain Park cross replacement presentation. We'll be ready to go on that item. Number 5, petition for consent for creation of municipal utility district. I believe Kent and Daniel will be ready on that item. Daniel?
We just got some more documents on that today, so I think we'll be ready.
Waiver of impact fees at the University Center. This item has been addressed and will be removed from the agenda. Fort Martin Scott, Texas Rangers update. I'll have some information to provide to the council regarding a resignation from the former Texas Rangers organization. This item will move down the list just a little bit. I'm not sure when or if that may happen at this time. And let's see, we have amendment to the records management plan policy, which will also move to the 20th. That goes along with the update item number 3. And mayor's appointments to boards and committees. I know we're going to discuss that during executive session tonight. Emily's resignation from P&Z. We typically allow just a little bit of time for applications for that board. That might be appropriate to discuss that on the 6th, make that decision on the 6th.
So is your ordinary procedure to put these things that might be considered? I mean, these are things that are certainly needing to be deliberated and discussed. But considering that we've lost a council member and Bobby's absence on the next regular meeting, some of these things could move.
Yes, sir.
Or be done in a special meeting.
I
just want to be up, you keep me up on the urgency.
We can certainly do that. And I would say one item that does have a timeline would be the municipal utility district item. That's something that we need to discuss probably sooner than later.
Okay.
But a lot of these things can move. They're not time critical. They're not a lot of them critical issues.
Okay. All right. That's just by way of information, correct?
Yes, sir.
We just reported. Okay.
Correct.
All right, council. We're now at executive session, or we'll be going into executive session. I want to thank all of you for being here tonight. And thank you for waiting until the bitter end, 2 hours and 20 minutes. Very, very kind of you to do so. I'll take a motion.
I'll move that we go out of regular session into executive session.
I second that motion.
Motion second. item number 16, business item, we did not take any action on the items in the name of executive session. So I believe we're done.
I move to adjourn.
I'll say,
I have a motion. No, I'm gonna let Kathy second that.
I'll second.
Yeah, motion second to adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? And thank you. Good night.